everyone, welcome back to A Vintage Vanity in the So Vintage series. So today I am taking the pain out of using muslin to mock up a pattern. Now we made some major changes to our pattern pieces, and guess what guys, we need to make sure these fit properly to our measurements before we take the scissors to our fabric. So why don't we go ahead and get started, and you guys can see how we go from this to this and how we determine what our changes are going to be. To start this off, all you're going to do is take your muslin and you're going to fold it in half, and then you're going to pin down your pattern pieces onto the fabric. Then just take your fabric scissors and cut them out. Now muslin is really cheap. You can find it at your fabric or crafting store for anywhere from 99 cents to $2. I just go with the cheapest I can get. With the pattern pieces all cut out, now all you need to do is transfer all your pattern markings onto the muslin, and you're also going to want to cut out any of the little triangles that are in the pattern piece as well. Now we're going to be attaching the pieces together. You can see laid out the front halter piece here is pinned to the back halter piece. The back halter pieces are pinned together and then finally pinned again to the front halter piece. Now we're going to take this over to the sewing machine and we're going to give it a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance on each of the pin sections. Here we have the halter trim piece, and where we have pinned it on each of the shorter ends, we're going to go ahead, take it to the machine, and we're going to give it a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance as well. Alright, so finally we're going to attach that trim piece to the halter body, and all you're going to do is on the thicker section you're going to match up the seam of the halter trim to the seam of the center back, and then all you're going to need to do is pin that down. Then what we're going to do is we're going to match up the edges of both of those pieces, and then we're going to pin the pieces together. Now you're going to do this all the way up into the point where you reach your first pattern marking, which will be a small circle. At that point you want to stop pinning. Then you are going to find the other pattern markings you made, which again will be 2 small dots, and you're going to match them up. Then you're going to pin them together. And once you have that all pinned up, you're going to repeat the process on the other side of the top as well. Alright, now that it's all pinned down, we're going to take it to the machine, give it a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. But you'll notice you're going to have this big gap, and that is between the 2 pattern markings that we made, and you just kind of want to gather it together as you're feeding it through the machine. Alright, so this is my mannequin. It is set to my measurements. If you don't have a mannequin, this next step you can do by trying on the shirt yourself. We are going to start with the center back here. So again, we're going to bring that right into center. And then we're going to pin that. Bring this piece around, and we're going to pin it on the side. What I can see is that my center seam here is not quite reaching the center of the mannequin. So I want to bring this seam to center. So what we're going to do is you're going to take a measuring tape and how far we need to move that over to make it center. The curvature of the piece, which is great to give a good body feel. The bottom here is a little bit farther off, so we've got 1 inch on the bottom to bring it to center. Then for our center, it's going to be a 1/2 inch, and our top we'll do a 1/2 inch as well. I already know that's what it takes to bring just this back halter section to the side of my body. So that's just this piece alone. So now that we have those measurements, we're going to move on to the front. Now the front piece, all our measurements are going to be based off of our button, and it's going to be based off of the center mark. Let's mark it as center here. That's the center mark of our button. So we need to determine how far we need to move this piece over so that that center mark reaches the center of our bust line. Okay, so we're going to measure that, and that's 1.5 inches. You might be saying, but Jen, you added some room here on the bottom halter, wouldn't you want to subtract for that? For the other two buttons, we will take that into consideration. But for the top button, as you can see, the halter doesn't start, this back halter piece doesn't start until back here. So we're not going to adjust for that just yet. Once again, mark that center piece of the button and measure. This one, if we trace it all the way around, look at that, right? We added a 1/2 inch in the back halter piece. So this 2.5 inches, we're only going to add on 2 inches. We're going to do that again for the bottom here. And this bottom needs to come in about 3.5 inches. So again, minus an inch, because that's what we did on our bottom. It's going to come in 2.5 inches. So those are the adjustments we're going to make on the bodice. Now the other thing is we need to make adjustments to our strap as well. This is all lined up. This is all one piece if we remember, but look at that. Even though this is lined up with the center back here, this is nicely going up and around the shoulder. But look where our center seam on this is. It's all the way over here. That's not good, guys. We don't like that. So let's go ahead and pin that. From that center seam, you're going to measure all the way to the back of the neck. And that is 3.5 inches. Now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my collar piece that we've created. I did not cut this out in the mocked up pieces, but once again, we're going to want to line that up with the back, and you're going to want to bring that around. Because, ooh, look where that falls, right? We want this to actually fall exactly where the top of the shirt starts. So, once again, let's pin that in place. Now, one of the reasons why I left this just as the pattern piece, because I want to show you how you can do this just on your pattern pieces alone. So with that pattern piece, I'm going to measure my difference from here to the top of the bust line, and that is about 2 inches, but that doesn't take into account our seam allowances, because you'll have a seam allowance in the back of 5/8 of an inch, and you're going to have a seam allowance down here of 5/8 of an inch. So you want to also increase that by your seam allowance. So we're going to increase our collar length by 3¼ of an inch. So there we go, we have our new measurements so that we can adjust our pattern piece. Now one thing to keep in mind when you adjust that pattern piece, like with the front halter top here, we said the top of it we wanted to adjust by 1.5. You want to make sure that you're evenly distributing that 1.5 on each side of the pattern piece. Now an easy way to actually do that is to actually splice the pattern right down the middle and kind of open that pattern piece up specifically to that change, and that way you're getting equal distribution of the increase on your pattern piece. Now I do suggest after you make the changes to your pattern piece to go ahead and mock it up once again, because as you can see we were able to make very custom alterations to our own bodies, and as well you want to make sure it fits, and this is a really quick and easy process to do, and it's a great way to do it before you cut it out of your fabric, and it's so much easier to make the adjustments now rather than making the adjustments once you're actually in the process of making the piece. And as well, if you ever decide that you want to make yourself another halter top, your pattern pieces are fitting your measurements exactly. And next week when you join me again, we're actually going to have our pieces cut out at the real fabric, and we'll get started sewing the final halter top. So I hope you guys really enjoyed today's So Vintage, and as always, go ahead in the comment section, let me know what you thought of today's video, and an easy way to let me know you liked it is to click the thumbs up, and if you're new, go ahead, click that subscribe, and if you want more of this face, check out some of my other videos. You guys have a great day, and I will see you on Tuesday. Bye!